Hello, how are you? Welcome. I'm excited to be here with you today, and this week I'm going to be chatting about anger. Before I go into that deep dive of a story time, I invite you to get comfortable. I'm comfortable. It's day 2 of my cycle, and I'm going to be comfortable because my uterus told me so. It's angry itself, and it's just, we're gonna be nice and kind to our body as it does what it does and just go with the flow. So I'm just gonna be a bit comfy today and staying warm. And so feel free to do whatever you need to do if you want to grab a tea or grab a coffee or get cozy somewhere. And as we do, before we get too ahead of ourselves, before we dive in, we tune in. So I'm gonna take a deep breath in, hold, and release out. A nice grounding breath, a nice cleansing breath, which is nice, especially as we're going to talk about anger. I'll see how far I want to go today as far as a deep dive and story time, some of my early experiences of anger, and I guess in certain relationships as well. There have been things of abuse, and so without necessarily going back into that, and because I feel like going through those things over and over again in your head, or even vocalizing them over and over again, can also be a source of re-traumatization. So I very much so try to avoid constantly talking about traumatic events over and over and over again, because it just reactivates certain parts of the brain and just puts you back into those spaces. So one part of my healing journey has been acknowledging that, and just acknowledging that I don't have to revisit it all over and over and over again to heal it, and I don't need to disclose it over and over again to people to be understood. So if you've dealt with different traumas, then I hope offering that also provides a certain comfort. One thing that I've learned about trauma as well is that sometimes there is this need to be understood, and this need to, when we're connecting with people, when certain triggers come about, this need to be understood. And it can be very traumatizing and re-traumatizing to have to explain and go over certain things. So you don't have to. You never have to share anything that you don't want to share. You never have to speak on certain things that happen to you if you don't want to, if the environment doesn't call for that. And there are so many different ways to be loved and understood that doesn't require you to replay a traumatic event, and doesn't require you to replay those stories in your head and in conversation. I've always found that when I have gone out of my way to say or explain myself to certain people as far as saying certain things related to that, it's always been in a situation where that person made me feel unsafe to a certain extent. And so then I felt like I had to explain myself in that way. Very genuine, authentic relationships never put me in a space of feeling like I had to explain myself. So that's always been a food for thought. If I feel like I have to go out of my way to explain to someone why I do what I do or act the way that I act, then there's probably something to be said about that relationship dynamic as well. But just a little long-winded trigger warning as far as if there's certain topics or certain things that I talk about today that just don't sit well with you, never feel like you have to live through something that doesn't feel comfortable for you. If you're having negative thoughts, or if you're having bodily sensations, just things that are coming up that just make you uncomfortable, then honor yourself, honor your body, honor your boundaries, click out of the video and keep it moving, because your well-being, your health is a priority. Yes. Anger, and why I feel like it's coming up right now, as far as I like dropping a bit of astrology and things, as Right now I'm having a Mars transit in my first house, which is in shadow because it's about to go retrograde. The energies of Mars are very much energies of a warrior, how we express our anger, and it's in my first house of my identity and self. And it's also going to retrograde back into Cancer, which is my 12th house, which is the house of subconscious. So a lot of things have been coming up for me. So it's not even just in the present moment things that are making me angry, but it's things from the past that seem to be coming back to the surface for me to address. Not necessarily address with the other person, because I do feel like I'm at peace as far as the conversations that I've needed to have with anyone, but it's more so for myself as far as recognizing my relationship with anger and why I have felt the need over the years to suppress it so much. So that's more so what I feel is coming up for me right now. And Pluto has been, I'm an early degree Leo rising, early degree Scorpio sun sign. And so Pluto has been moving, has just moved from Capricorn to Aquarius. And so it's going to be opposing Mars. So there's like Mars opposition from my 12th house, 6th house to my first house, 7th house. So that tension of energy, I feel like, is what is potentially contributing to some of these things coming up to the surface from an energetic standpoint. And I feel supported in this chapter of my life to be able to explore those things in a safe space. I am in my own space right now, and I'm not Cole, who's peacefully sleeping, my dog. So I'm not yelling. I'm not throwing things. It's a very peaceful space, even if I am exploring some of these more interesting themes. It's not an outward anger or an anger as far as needing to rage and hit something. It's more so being connected to the energetics of anger as far as why it's important to embrace anger. Anger is so tied to your boundaries. It's so tied to your ability to protect yourself from a genuine place. Sometimes our defense mechanism can be overly activated. We can come from a place of being very overly activated, so we're just defensive. Everything kind of causes us to pop off. Everything causes us to lose it. And I've definitely had moments of my life of being very activated. But anger in its just pure form, and I feel like every energy has this purity to it. In its pure form, it's there to unite us, and it's there to protect us, and it's there to preserve our integrity. And so when someone is crossing a boundary, when you're crossing your own boundary, it's that energetic push to say, no, you can't cross this boundary. And you need that. It's just like when you put your hand in the flame, in the fire, and then you get burnt and you get that, I'm not gonna put my finger in that fire again because I'm gonna get hurt. It's painful. So the anger is there, that sort of spark of energy is there, so it can provide that protection, so it could provide that space for you to be able to be in your safety, right? And I've often believed that to be in relationships, relationships is where you don't have boundaries. And I would have friendships and romantic relationships where everything went. They could get away with murder, they can get away with all sorts of things, and I didn't react. I just brushed it over the rug for the greater good, for the peace. Just keep moving. It's fine, it's okay. You just brush all these things under the rug. And I had a therapy session, and I was explaining her a situation where she was like, it would be okay for you in this moment, based on what you're telling me, to be angry. And I was struggling to be angry in that moment. And I was like, well, I was overly compensating for that other party and overly making excuses for them at my own expense, and not really giving myself the room to live in that anger, at least long enough for me to be like, hey, how they acted wasn't okay. It was just kind of what the anger is there to do. And she was very good about being like, I'll hold the space for that. And whenever you feel like accessing it, you can access it. And I'm gonna hold the space for that. And I was really grateful because I acknowledged that in that moment. I wasn't in a space to access that anger. And for a long time, I felt a lot of guilt and I felt a lot of shame around anger and expressing anger. Being angry in a relationship meant betraying that person. Being angry in a relationship meant harming the relationship, threatening the relationship in some way. Even if that person had all the allowances to act in a way that was harmful to me. And coming to the realization now of this being in dynamics like that, letting people hurt me, letting people take advantage of me just for the sake of being in a relationship with them, it's bringing up anger because I am recognizing that I have made myself very small and felt like being in a relationship meant making myself very small and allowing someone to make me feel small. And giving them the room and the permission to make me feel small, as long as they were my friend, as long as there was the potential of romance and the potential of relationship. You can make me feel small. You can make me feel disrespected. It's okay. And another thing that my therapist was saying was just like, so I was telling her how I had tried multiple times to reach a certain consensus in a relationship, and she was like, you might never be able to reach a consensus. They might never be in a space to receive you in that way. At the end of the day, it serves them. Your behavior as it is serves them. So they're not gonna change, and they're not gonna want you to change. And that was a huge eye-opener because it's true that people will, whether it's a conscious thought process or a subconscious thought process, when you've conditioned people to treat you a certain way, in a way that serves them, they are not very keen to change the dynamic. And it was fun. It was funny because I was in a dating experience and there was a miscommunication, and I was reaching out to the person to get clarification, and I had reached out to them made a few attempts at communication, and they were not very forthcoming with their communication back. And when I finally was like, you know what, enough is enough, I feel at this point very drained and even distressed at this point because I've been reaching out and being pretty much getting the cold shoulder. This is not healthy communication, healthy dynamic. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. And then they responded. And I was just like, it was just very funny how every time I was trying to communicate in a way that was healthy, in a way that was from a place of connection and understanding, it was crickets. But as soon as I was setting a firm boundary and I was upset, then they were interacting with me. And it just seemed like they were only in a space to interact if there was conflict. And I was like, you're giving toxic vibes. This is giving toxic vibes. You can't just be receptive when there is the threat of conflict. Outside of that, you just don't want to communicate or you don't want to be forthcoming. So it was a very strange dynamic, but that person, by doing that, was showing me their level of maturity and how it is that they wanted to interact, or how the quality of interactions that they wanted to have in this dynamic. And it served them when I was dysregulated. It served them when I was angry or stressed, because as long as I was the angry one, I was the unreasonable one, the emotional one in the dynamic, then they would have an excuse to say, well, look, this is not working. Clearly, they were looking for an excuse, and me being dysregulated fed into their excuse. They were not looking to understand me. They weren't looking to meet me in a way that was compassionate. Every attempt that I made to have a reasonable communication with them was shut down. And the only way that they wanted to interact was in a way that was conflictual and just toxic. And you have to take in that information. When people show you who they are, when people show you the level of interaction that they can interact with, then believe them. If someone can only speak to you when they're insulting you, when they're cussing you out, then that's the quality of their level of communication and interactions. And that's maybe not someone that you're going to be able to sit down and have a deep, thoughtful conversation with, or someone every time you try to talk to them, they just shut down emotionally and they can't, they're too busy, this, that, and the third. They're not in a space to receive you. That doesn't erase, at the end of the day, your self-worth. And it can be hard in a relationship dynamic to come to terms with, this person is not willing to meet me in a way that honors me and honors my self-worth. And it's a very hard decision to make, to say, like, I may need to walk away from this dynamic. Especially if you haven't been modeled that behavior of being able to walk away from a dynamic and set boundaries in a dynamic that is toxic or abusive or not good for your well-being. So I've had to understand that my anger did serve a purpose, and it served the purpose of me establishing and reinforcing those boundaries in those relationships where my boundaries were being clearly violated. I think because of my relationship past, just whether it be very early childhood experiences or whether it be just like early child experiences and just my programming around relationships in general, I was very severely bullied as a young child, and just that wounding around rejection and never feeling chosen or never feeling like I was good enough for someone to care to know me or care to be friends with me. I think I carried that into other relationship dynamics and would just grateful to be there. Just when someone finally did decide to be my friend or did, oh, I have a friend, and being so attached to that friendship because coming from this place of lack, right? Coming from this place of, I'm tending to Kovu here. That's, my hand is just like, there's a Kovu. I don't know. I can't bring him into this. He's trying to settle him down. Probably hear him breathing. Papa. Can you settle down so I can finish the video? You settle. It's fine. You put your little music in a minute. And because I was coming from that place of rejection and feeling like if someone was taking the time out of their day to speak to me, then they must be some sort of just putting people on some sort of pedestal. It wasn't even like gratitude. It was just, I don't even know what the word is, but overly valuing, overly considering somebody else. Because it's like, oh, they like me, or they gave me the time of day. Because that was such a foreign concept for me, to think that someone could genuinely like me and genuinely value me, because so much of my early experience was me being abused with zero understanding of why. And there is no why. There's no justification to abuse. But when you're a child, you internalize things, and I think I internalized a lot of my abuse as something's wrong with me, I'm defective. And so when you're going into your relationships with that sort of modeling, I definitely put a lot of people on pedestals that didn't deserve it. They didn't deserve the blind trust, the blind love, and the boundless, no bound, you can do no wrong energy that I was bringing to the dynamic, because I was so primed, I was so desperate for connection because it had been denied to me, but I was also didn't have the self-esteem and the self-worth. So I was going into dynamics with little self-esteem, little self-worth, feeling overly like I owed the other person. You know what I mean? Like they've done something fantastic just by talking to me, and giving them so much of that credit for just existing. They're God's gift to the world. And everyone is. So I accepted a lot of things. And I remember having like a group of friends, and granted not all the friends did that, but like I would have like a friend that I considered a best friend, and they would like at some point just realize how they would talk to me and how they would make fun of me a lot of the times. And it never sat well with me that they would make jokes at my expense. It never sat well with me that they would make fun of me. And I understand that people, and I had to learn that eventually, is to laugh at myself, because I definitely, because of my past with just being really severely bullied, it was very hard for me to laugh at myself because I was so defensive, and I had it so ingrained in me that there was something defectuous with me, that like when people would laugh at me, I would take it very personally as an attack. And so I struggled laughing at myself. And so that is something that I had to learn. I had to learn to not take myself so seriously. But part of that was also getting to a place where I felt safe and I felt seen and understood and had the room to kind of rebuild my self-esteem. And so within that context, very easy to laugh at myself, very easy to not take myself seriously. But I still was finding that even as I was healing, or those parts were kind of healing in some way, that I would get genuinely hurt or offended if certain friends would say certain comments, because I didn't notice them making those types of comments about other friends, and I was always uplifting them, and I was always saying really kind, good things about them, and then they would always have this sort of backward comment to make. And it did bother me. It bothered me, and that is something that I had to realize that was actually bothering me, because it was a boundary violation where it wasn't okay for me for someone to talk to me that way, but I was letting it be because they were justifying it, and because I felt like I couldn't afford to lose friends. I couldn't afford to lose something that, just again coming from that lack mentality, I couldn't afford to lose a friend. Who else was gonna like me? Who else was gonna understand me? Who else was going to deal with my shit? And so because I felt that so strongly, I allowed myself to stay in certain dynamics that were harmful. And I think that also translated into romantic relationships, where now I can look back and be like, I was verbally abused, I was emotionally abused, I was mentally abused, I was sexually abused, and I would have never been in a place to even vocalize that before, because in my head, well, I love this man, and so everything goes because I love this man. He can say whatever he wants, he can do whatever he wants, because. And now just realizing that the level at which that early damage, what it allowed me to, like the early abuse, how it made room for me to continue to be abused in so many ways. And as I grow older and I heal and I build my confidence, because those things, they rob your confidence, they fuck up your self-image and perception of yourself. It's taken a long time. It's taking a lot of years. It's taking a lot of work to get to a place where I can even see myself for myself, because I wasn't seeing myself clearly at all. And as I work through clearing up that filter and healing, the anger grows, I guess. The anger grows because it's like, whoa, I let people get away with a lot of shit. And like I said, I don't have it in me in this moment in time to share that with them. They're not in my life, and I accept God's work in purging, because it was anger. Ooh. My anger saved me, because in moments when I got angry enough, in moments when I said enough is enough, I was able to detach myself from some of these connections And if it wasn't for my anger, if it wasn't for me getting angry enough, I would still find a justification to still have those people in my life. It's that anger that's protected me. It's that anger that was able to say enough is enough. And just done that clearing, done that purging to get these motherfuckers out of my life. For real. And I am grateful for anger. All these years of being shamed and being made a villain for expressing genuine anger and frustration and being made to feel like I'm this unstable character when I was simply defending myself in situations that were not for me. I'm okay now. Now that I understand myself, now that I understand I value myself, right? And yes, I honor the value of connection. Connection is a beautiful thing. It's so valuable. And I am so grateful for so many beautiful connections that I have in my life. Now that I'm able to pair that with genuine self-worth and genuinely seeing myself clearly for who I am and not the projection of somebody else, and not just playing a role in someone's life or playing the role that they want me to play, whether that be the ugly duckling friend, whether that be the unstable lover, whatever role that person is trying to make me play in their lives so they can justify their bad behavior towards me. I am able to see myself for who I am, know who I am, love who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between. And I have, beyond my compassion and beyond my kindness, I have my anger to thank. I have my anger to thank for getting me out of situations that I had, like I said, no business being in. I don't know. I believe in God's plan for me, and I believe that I was meant to learn my lessons and grow from them and evolve and keep going. And so I'm grateful for that. But it's my anger every time that saved me. I got angry enough. I got angry enough to say enough is enough. No. And so many years of suppressing that anger and so many years of being told I'm wrong for feeling it. Now I can look back and be like, no. Are there 1,000 million great healthy ways of expressing anger? 1,000%. Have I always expressed it in the most healthiest way? Nope. Do I regret any time I have cussed somebody out or had an angry outburst? Absolutely not. No. Because when I think back of who I have exploded at, it's people who have violated me and violated my boundaries and violated these very deep parts of myself that have violated intimacy, violated trust, and I did not owe them anything at that point. And with that said, for myself and the human that I want to be, the human that I want to be, I don't want to have to get there in certain dynamics and relationships. I don't want to have to be around so many toxic humans and so many toxic dynamics that I feel like the only way to defend myself is by operating in a toxic way. I think it's a telltale sign now that it's enough without having to react, without having to act on the anger. I think it's enough to be angry, and I think it's enough to recognize when I'm in a situation that does not honor me. I was explaining before, when there was a miscommunication, I was trying to approach it in a very healthy way, and they were not meeting me there. And then as soon as I got angry, then they want to engage in some sort of conflictual situation. And it's like, if the only way that you can operate is in a toxic way, then you and I can't be in a dynamic together, because that's not where I want to be. I don't want to be with someone that I'm always like, it's always it's always nonsense. I don't want to waste my energy. I don't want to expend my energy in that way. And so now I get to do the deep dive of really exploring where I have allowed individuals to violate me, why I have allowed them to do so, and how moving forward do I make sure that that doesn't happen again. And part of that exploration is in exploring my anger and trusting myself, trusting the journey that I've had so far, and just knowing who I am, and knowing that I am not a person for setting the boundaries that I'm setting. I'm not, even within my boundaries, especially in honoring my boundaries, I am worthy of good relationships and people that are going to love me and treat me right, and people will. There's people in my life, legit, we've never had altercations. And there's people, even if we've had altercations, we've been able to overcome them because they expressed that something was not sitting right with them. I expressed something wasn't sitting right with me, and we've been able to honor each other in that. Typically, when somebody expresses their anger in a healthy way, it creates this opportunity for a dialogue within that dynamic and within that relationship, so both people can treat each other accordingly. I had a recent dating experience where anger came up, and they were just talking in a way that was very controlling, and that my spidey senses were super heightened in that moment because they were using a lot of language that I feel was very controlling and possessive, and I felt very much violated in that. And so it happened once, and I was like, oh, minor violation. And then we saw each other in person, and it was like, violation. I was like, okay, we're not seeing each other again. And I knew I wasn't going to see them again, but I felt so much like pressure. I don't know where that pressure was coming from, but I kept on trying to justify my anger. I kept on trying to justify, and it's not like I wasn't angry towards them outwardly. I wasn't being rude to them or disrespectful or anything like that, but I just felt the spark, right? Like they made me feel like frustrated or annoyed, you know what I mean? I felt it, and I was like, they were doing this stuff and saying it, I felt like you're crossing a boundary. And so I knew it's something that needed to be addressed, and it was happening in a way that was like, it was too early, that I felt like at this point, this is a behavior that I feel like if we continue this dynamic, it's just going to keep progressing. And beyond that, I know what I deserve at this point, and I don't want this. There's certain things that I just don't want to compromise on, and that was it. And this is something that years ago I probably wouldn't have been able to do. And even at that, years later, I still had the mental ping pong of a struggle. But I took a couple of days, thought about it, and then I reached out to them, talked to them, and I was just like, you know what, for these reasons, we can't see each other. And they were very respectful about it. I knew that they would be somewhat receptive, and they were, but it was one of the first times that I listened to myself in that way, where I had something like a feeling that you get, and I actually followed through with saying, I'm not gonna wait a couple of months, I'm not gonna wait years, I'm not gonna wait for another opportunity for you to do this. It's a no. And so many times in my life, I have let so many things go and slide that I had no business letting go, no business letting slide. And it's those things that come up now in these seasons of life that are just like, I cannot believe it. And so I've had to reconcile that relationship with anger, because in not embracing that connection, I was actually walking in and out of situations, a revolving fucking door, that were not serving me, that were putting me in situations where I was just flat out being disrespected and abused. And I don't deserve that. I don't deserve that. And it's not about, like, who cares what the person went through. We all have a laundry list of shit that happened to us. You can't be in that space where you're making excuses. But how many times have I made excuses for, oh, they were having a bad day, they this, that, and the third. And it's like, now I'm in a place in my life where it's like, I have zero responsibility as far as how another person chooses to show up. That has everything to do with them. I owe it to myself to be good to myself and have boundaries, and be good to myself and honor my self-worth. They had a bad day, but it doesn't mean that they get to talk to me crazy, that they get to be disrespectful, that I get to set the boundary of I don't want to be talked to this way, I don't want to be in this environment. I get to have that say, and you get to have your bad day. You're allowed, you're right, you are allowed to have a bad day. And I'm allowed to remove myself from the situation. And I have stayed. I have wanted to stay in places that have hurt me. And I thank God for my anger. I do thank God for my anger, because there are certain situations that I've been in, there's certain sides of people that I've seen where it's like, if I wasn't angry enough, then who knows? Who knows? If they were able to talk to me that way, if they were able to show certain violent behaviors in front of me in certain ways, who knows if I would be here today to tell the tale. Or certain people who are abusing you emotionally or mentally in certain dynamics, you know what I mean? Who knows? And I feel like there's also something to be said about energy. Even if someone is, people who talk about you behind your back, and then when they're in front of you and they act like they're your best friend, or people who don't have good intent towards you, that energy as well gets thrown at you. And sometimes you're around people and you don't know why you feel sad, you don't know why you feel down, you don't know why your esteem is because you're around someone who don't like you. You're around someone who don't like you. You ever been around someone who just good vibes? You know what I mean? When we say good vibes, when you're around someone and it just feels right, their smile is genuine, you don't question it because you recognize that energy, your soul recognizes that energy. I was reading my journal from when I did my yoga teacher training, and one of the things I wrote that had been mentioned is the body never lies. When you're around people and it feels good, just you don't know them from Adam. You don't know them like that, but their energy is so pure, is so genuine. And there's some people that you're there scratching your head. What did they say? What was that? Why do I feel so funky around them? Why do you need to wait to find out? You don't need to wait to find out. You don't need to wait to find out that they're talking behind your back. You don't need to wait to find out that they're not genuine with you. You don't need to wait to find out that they're an asshole. You don't need to wait to find out that they're toxic or that they're an abuser. The inklings that you get are enough. And if you got mad enough, if you got ilked enough to cut ties with them, to not be around them, then let God do his godly things. Let God rid them of your life, because those people weren't going to do nothing good for you. Those aren't entities that were going to bring anything positive in your life. Let them go. Thank your anger. Because there is nobody that is genuine with you, that is authentic with you, sees you, that is going to misinterpret you setting a boundary, misinterpret your anger in a way that paints you in a light that isn't who you are. When people start painting this version of you that isn't even aligned with you, then you're like then it doesn't even make sense for you to sit there and try to justify to that person who you are. You don't have to explain. No, you don't owe anybody an explanation on who you are. And it's hilarious because the people who are genuine and see you in a genuine way, you don't have to explain shit to them because they see you. And so you have to question the people that you always have to sit there with and tell them, well, this, that, need a whole damn explanation. Those people, they don't want to see you. They probably can't see you through the filter of their own nonsense. They probably can't even see themselves clearly. Let them go. Kovu is officially getting restless. I hope I didn't go way too long-winded in this whole chat about anger. It's probably be something I'm gonna keep having to unpack because it's a big one for me. But I am interested in hearing what you have to say, and I would love to hear your comments, feel free to share down below, and like and subscribe and share this with anyone who you feel could benefit as well. And I'll be back next week with another video and another topic around trust. And the goal is that hopefully the more we trust in ourselves and the more we build that inner self and armor, that the better we can show up for ourselves. And the better we can show up for ourselves, the better we can show up for other people. And the better we can show up for other people, then the better the world can be. And that's the ultimate, I guess. The ultimate ripple effect is we start the work within and we see it play out in the collective, and we're all better for it. So take care of yourself, take your grounding breaths, be good, and we'll see each other.